Today, we're going to dive into a really challenging idea from the work of Zachary David Enfield. He makes a comparison that honestly, at first glance, seems pretty shocking, but it's meant to reveal something broken in a system designed to protect our most vulnerable. So let's get right into it.
Okay, so this is the statement that kicks the whole thing off. It's a lot. And the author's point is that one of these things is an evil we can all agree on, something we universally condemn. But the other, he argues, is a kind of harm that operates right out in the open, not just legally, but often with society's praise. So how on earth is that even possible? Let's unpack the argument.
So on one side, you have Jeffrey Epstein, a criminal conspiracy. And on the other, the foster care system, a government program meant to provide care. I mean, they seem like total opposites, right? So how does the author even start to compare them? Well, it all boils down to one single, really crucial distinction.
And here it is. It's the difference between harm that happens against the law and harm that happens through the law. This one idea, this is the key to understanding this entire, very difficult argument.
Let's just look at this breakdown. With Epstein, you have a private network. It's universally condemned. The harm is happening outside the law, which means prosecution is the goal. But then you look at the foster care system. It's state-sanctioned. It's often praised as care. Whole industries and government budgets depend on it. And here, the author argues, the harm happens through the law itself.
And that right there is the foundation of the whole thing. One is an illegal act of exploitation. The other, this argument goes, is a legal system of exploitation, one that's written directly into policy.
To explain this, the author lays out what they call a moral hierarchy of harm. So at level 1, you've got individual crime. A person hurts someone, society prosecutes them. Simple enough. At level 2, you have systemic crime, where institutions enable that harm. But level 3, this is what the model calls the most insidious level, legalized harm. This is where the law itself becomes the weapon, and this is exactly where the author places the foster care system.
And this right here is probably the best way to think about it. Epstein is framed as a monster, a single, horrifying evil that you can, in theory, hunt down and lock away. But the foster care system? That's presented as a machine, a huge, impersonal, and legally protected structure that just keeps running, day in and day out, until someone finds the will to actually dismantle it.
So if it's a machine, you have to ask, how does it work? What's the fuel? And to understand that, we have to follow the money. This is where the argument reframes the entire system as a machine for value extraction.
This quote, it really cuts to the heart of the economic side of this. It poses a really simple but kind of devastating question. If the tens of thousands of dollars the state spent were truly for the child, then where did all that money actually go? First, let's just get our heads around the scale here. Every single year, there are roughly 400,000 young people in the U.S. foster care system. That's a huge number. Now, for each one of those kids, over an average stay in the system, the state pays out somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000. According to this argument, that is the economic value that is generated just by that child's presence in the system.
And if you zoom out, the numbers are just staggering. Since just the year 2000, more than 5 million young people have aged out of this system. A system that generated billions of dollars from their presence, and yet so many of them start their adult lives with absolutely nothing.
So here's how the author models where that money goes. It's called the transfer of value. The child's situation generates the economic value. That's the EVG, the money the state pays out. But that value is received by the foster household. That's the EVR. So think about it this way. The child is the asset, but the dividends get paid to somebody else. The value is transferred away, not invested for that child's future.
And this brings us right back to why the author calls this whole thing more debasing. Epstein's victims knew they were being abused, but in this model, foster youth are economically exploited and then told they were helped. Society praises the whole system, the foster parents, the caseworkers, everybody, all while the child, who generated thousands in value, very often ages out with nothing to show for it.
Okay, so this is where the argument gets even bigger. The author claims that the foster care system isn't some unique, isolated problem. It's actually just one example of a much larger pattern that's woven into our society. And they call this the master pattern, the act of converting a human crisis into a revenue stream. From this point of view, the system is designed to make money from the persistence of a problem, not from solving it. Because, if the problem ever got solved, the revenue stream would just dry up.
And a direct parallel is drawn to the criminal justice system. A child's crisis becomes a revenue stream for foster agencies. In the same way, a person's crime can become a revenue stream for private prisons. The argument is that in both systems, the business model profits from the problem continuing, not from it ever being fixed.
This connects that whole pattern to a broader constitutional crisis, when the absolute necessities of life, whether it's care for a child or just basic survival, are turned into profit centers. The author argues the government is no longer securing rights, it's basically auctioning them off.
So, okay, if that's the critique, what's the solution? Well, the source material lays out an alternative framework, and it's called egalitarianism.
Now, it's really important to understand this definition. This isn't about getting rid of free markets. It's about creating a solid foundation. The idea is simple. Guarantee the absolute basics for survival, things like healthcare, food, housing, as public goods. And then once everyone's survival is secure, let the free market do its thing with everything else.
So when you apply this model to foster care, it proposes 5 massive changes. First, a trust fund so that economic value actually follows the child into adulthood. Second, outcome accountability. Judge agencies on the life outcomes of the youth, not just how many kids they place. Third, invest in keeping biological families together in the first place. Fourth, total financial transparency. And fifth, give youth the actual legal power to sue if the system fails in its duty to them.
And that brings us full circle. The final point is this. The Epstein list reveals individual monsters, and we can prosecute monsters. But the foster care system, in this view, reveals a monster that's built right into the law itself. You can arrest a person, but you have to dismantle a system.
And so that leaves us with this one final, really provocative question. Is a system that produces these kinds of outcomes a failure of good intentions? Or is it actually a successful design doing exactly what it was built to do? Something to think about.